In this debate, Mundane Politics will focus on political institutions. These organizations create, enforce, and apply laws that are fundamental aspects of politics today. We discuss the future of political institutions and the efficacy of these organizations. We also touch on the role of government and the consolidation of power. Thank you for watching. Please comment your own thoughts in the section below and don't forget to subscribe.
Good evening and welcome to Mundane Politics. Tonight with me I have Rajan Anderson, Lane Carter, Wes Thompson, and Sahad Kassam. So I just want to start off with wondering what your opinions are on a two-party system in the U.S.
Well, I think that the two-party system in the U.S. really doesn't give much choice. You have these two parties that are essentially brokerage parties and try to appeal to sort of the middle. And basically what happens is their policies aren't very far apart, and you have all the people on one side of the spectrum and all the people on the other side of the spectrum voting for one party, when in reality it's not. It's sort of like the same sort of small spectrum that's being shown and represented in Washington.
I would agree with that.
I agree that having a two-party system is rather divisive. It does divide the country, essentially, in this or that. And you have these halves. And though there are fringe parties, they're not represented well enough that they even stand a chance of ever being able to be one of the major parties in the system. The one thing I do think that it does create, though, is because you have that confrontation, it does entice people to want to follow politics more, I would say, in that country, but at the same time, that just allows politicians to demagogue and pander in order to stay in power. So there is that element that I feel as though it fosters political activism, but at the same time, it almost waters down the political process.
I would agree with Rajan's point, saying that, and I guess Wes does as well, just as, but I would condition it with the fact that I think that two parties are perhaps too few to represent well represent the public's opinion. I think that devotee parties, I think that the U.S. politics is much more circulates much more around devotee parties, and I feel like that is a good thing because you are voting for the person, you're voting for Obama, you're voting for Mitt Romney, and while you are voting for what they stand for, I feel like it's much more for the individual than in Canadian politics. It's not enough, in my opinion. I think that it should be more that way, but I think that adds a little bit of
I disagree with that. I disagree with that because I think that makes people vote for people for very superficial reasons. You start voting for just this person, and I think you pay less attention to the actual ideology and the platform, and more just this person and your image of them. And so you vote for far more superficial reasons.
No, that's pretty much what I was going to say, is that having just two parties and having this whole system where you're mainly voting for the person rather than the party, you're taking out the whole people looking through the values and beliefs of the party. You're looking more on which party leader is able to entice you more with their play with words.
Shouldn't that be what it's about?
I disagree that the U.S. politics are, the Democrat and Republican parties are devotee parties at all, because devotee parties are built around a charismatic leader, and they tend to rise and fall with such leaders. Republican and Democratic parties have a bunch of group of elite members which are who the leader is chosen from. It's a cadre party, not a devotee party. And secondly, I'd just like to address Wes's earlier statement that it entices people. I think really what it does is it creates an entertainment industry around the political process, and in doing so, it becomes less about the values and beliefs of people and more about who can spend the most money and who can make the best.
To an extent, I agree with that, but I think that through that entertainment, you can foster actual activism. I think that the entertainment aspect of it can draw you towards it, and though I had already prefaced my comment with this before, I do think that it allows politicians to pander and demagogue, and it waters down the process. At the same time, I do think that it almost removes that type of political apathy. I mean, in Canada, for example, I would argue that Canada has far more political apathy than the States does with our system, which I would argue is far more pragmatic. but less people get involved because it's not as glamorous.
Well, the thing about glamorizing politics is I think people are engaged for the wrong reasons. I mean, if you're attracted by the entertainment industry of politics, you're not really, you're attracted by one side's, either the Democrat or the Republicans, sort of self-made image of a Democrat or a Republican. So you're sort of fitting yourself into like an image. So it becomes less about policies and policies that will benefit you, and more about how you perceive yourself.
When I spoke of devotee parties, perhaps I'm not well versed enough to make that call, but I do feel that both parties, just taking the current U.S. elections, both parties had charismatic leader, and so I felt that in that aspect, both of them kind of personified, devotee parties. So in that respect, and in just addressing the comment that you just said right now, I think I agree with that. I think that people should not be engaged for the wrong reasons. I think it is good that there is so much participation in the U.S. politics, but I think they should focus more on the integrity, to maintain the integrity.
Well, as a question, and this question is rhetorical, what do you think would be better? Having citizens that are more engaged in politics for what you claim to be the wrong reason, for its entertainment value, though they are accruing political knowledge at the same time, inadvertently they will be, or would you rather have a more pragmatic political system in which the voters are apathetic and aren't being a part of the democratic system?
I would prefer an apathetic system, that the voters are people who are engaged in politics not because of the entertainment value of politics, but because they have voices that they want to
yeah, but I think that's highly idealistic, because I don't think that ever really occurs. You have only a select few in Canada. I mean, for example, you had the previous administration, or the current administration in Canada, Conservative Party, they were held in contempt of court because they withheld information, but they won back with a majority, and that's a testament to political apathy. Not enough people went out. How can a party that previously had a minority have a vote of confidence because they were held in contempt of court and then gain back a majority? Well, only through apathy.
Well, I think that's not only through apathy, but it's because our system as well, it's not that two-party systems are divisive, but there's sort of this atmosphere in the party system that sort of amplifies, it's about your campaign instead of your actual values and your policies that you've made during the last your term in office. And I think that this should be changed by, why do political parties advertise for themselves? Why don't we create an organization, a non-governmental organization, whose job is to demonstrate the sides of different parties instead of these sort of propaganda ads that are put out?
I would say this is why I think that it's better to vote for the individual and not for the party, because I think that the solution to solving an apathetic voting population, the solution is not through increasing or upping the entertainment value. It's through picking or selecting or getting voted in a charismatic leader that people are going to want to follow. It's not entertainment. It's through integrity, increasing the integrity in politics, Canadian and American. I think they can both do to improve on that.
I just don't think that charisma necessarily substantiates validity. I just don't think because you have a charismatic leader, that means you have an intelligent leader that will make the right decision. So I don't think
Which is difficult to find such a leader, but I think if such a leader is found, and the U.S., we keep on going back to that, but it is a good example. There are so many people to choose from. I think it's possible. It's not only, it might be difficult, yes, to find someone who's charismatic, both charismatic and intelligent, but I don't think it is impossible by any means.
But if someone is charismatic, does that not just mean that they're more likable, so you'll look less at their values?
Exactly, for superficial reasons.
Yeah, so I believe that we really need to go through a societal shift, and head toward a more informed democracy rather than sort of either the U.S.'s sort of model where it's an entertainment industry, or Canada where we are sort of apathetic and it's starting to become a bit like this.
I disagree. I think a more charismatic leader does not necessarily mean, does not necessarily mean, it means that they just have, they have a better way of expressing ideas.
They're pretty much, they're better at demagoguing. They're better at finding a manner in which to satisfy. Yeah, but I don't think that communication necessarily means that they'll be a good leader. That essentially, I just think that means that they're better at manipulating the public into pandering and gaining more votes. And I don't think that's necessarily.
All I was going to say is that I disagree with having to vote for a leader rather than the party, because if you look at the long-term spectrum, it's the party that moves on and not the leader. And so if you were to constantly just vote on the leader, the values that are held by each leader are different, meaning that the values that are going to be entered into the American society will be continuously changing. While if you were just to vote for the party rather than the leader, you got one continuous value that the Americans can look up to, right? Instead of having to constantly move forward and backwards from different.
But isn't that the nature of a democratic society, that
there is change,
that there's change, and even political parties themselves change and
evolve.
Evolve with the time. So.
But that's evolving, and when you're evolving, you're learning from past mistakes, and you're kind of you're growing. But when you're getting a new leader, it's a completely different situation, as it's not evolving, it's changing.
I think a new leader doesn't mean that the values of the party will change if you vote for the leader.
The values of the party won't change, but the American people will see different values in the leader, and so they can be voting for a leader that has different values that maybe the party doesn't 100% agree with.
No, I'm just saying the leader should, if they are voted into representing either Democrat or Republican, if they're voted into representing that, they are representing the Democratic, the Republican values.
Well, not in its entirety. For example, Dick Cheney, he was for gay marriage, and that's because he had a daughter who I believe was gay. So I don't think that they're necessarily complete emissaries of the ideology.
But what I think is really restrictive of two-party system is essentially you have this bureaucracy that these two bureaucratic institutions that you have to go through if you want to be someone in politics. You can't become part of an independent party that perhaps is more akin to your values. If you're on the left of the spectrum, you go into the Democratic Party. If you are on the right, you go into the Republican Party. And really, when they shift, their policies are very close together, and they spend billions in campaign financing just to maintain sort of the status quo.
Well, in America, from my perspective, what other parties do you see being able to have an actual impact?
I would say that if you were on the right of the spectrum, the Libertarian Party with, I think it was Gary Johnson, ran last election, and the Green Party would be another option. There's Jill Stein, and there's a few others, but those are the ones that I...
So I have to ask you what your stances are on lobby groups.
I think lobby groups are, again, something that good in practice, or good in theory, but not so great in practice. More so in Canada. For example, lobby groups got rid of, in Canada, they got rid of advertisements for cigarettes and stuff, which is fine. But at the same time, I feel as though in the States, for example, lobbying groups, the power that they have is immense, to the point where I think that they themselves are becoming key political players, just the lobbyist groups. Whereas when I think of a lobbyist group, I would generally try to think of just a grassroots movement to spread awareness about a subject. But now you have lobbyist groups actually essentially legislating, because they have politicians in their pockets, and they're able to legislate and pass whatever legislation they deem fit through politicians, essentially having politicians act as their proxy.
Yeah, I think lobbyists have too much power in the States, because they essentially they control the politics in the States. It's because they have, like Wes said, they have such immense power, so much. It's often like just that have huge like I saw a documentary and on lobbyists, and there's so much cases of bribery, of corruption, and I think that just does nothing but degrade the American political system.
See, I'm not too against lobbyists having more power, but I think these special interest groups need to be, if they are to have more power, it needs to be much more transparent. They sort of, if we're going to give them more power, they should have sort of more of an official role that can be watched by the public, rather than sort of these behind-door deals that lobbyists currently engage in. And also, I feel that lobby groups are sort of disproportionately represented by people who have more money, or by certain groups have lobby groups are disproportionate in who they represent. And if for lobby groups to succeed, I would encourage more people to join them, and a more diverse range of lobby groups to exist.
All right. Well, you guys have some really good points. We're going to keep. So, welcome back. I just want to ask you guys, what do you think the political parties should be reformed to create a more democratic society?
Absolutely. I think that the current political party is a highly centralized, highly organized group of people pursuing, or organization that pursues certain ideals, and most of all, pursues power. I think we need to decentralize political parties so that they're more of grassroots movements with diverse opinions about subjects. Because let's face it, we don't all fit into one slot or another.
But you can't just artificially create a grassroots movement. By its very nature, it has to be created by the people. So the change that I think that you're talking about has to come from people. You can't artificially
And people so far have not
that.
initiated that change. They seem happy enough to vote with the current groups that there are.
I agree.
Well, I think that perhaps not grassroots, but still decentralized, so we allow individuals in the legislature to voice their own opinions, rather than these groups, maybe three groups of main political parties that people slot themselves in with, it's sort of a compromise. I think that we sort of need to, I agree that it's a hard process to undergo, but I think that we should actively pursue this, because I think it's our responsibility as a democratic society to
I think
pursue
far
ideals.
too many people are not engaged politically to facilitate that. There are just far too many people that are just complacent with the umbrella effect of claiming that you're for this party. You say that you're a liberal, that you're Democrat, that you're Republican, and there's just a whole bunch of societal, economic issues which you can then categorize that person's stance on. And that just makes it an easier process for people to get into. And idealistically, yes, we'd have a process where everyone would be engaged, and everyone would actively pursue their own values. But because, frankly, people are too lazy, cannot do that.
Yeah.
I think that we should focus primarily not on creating more parties that would better represent the public, because I think any way you're going to look at it.
I'm not advocating creating more parties. I'm advocating that we decentralize parties so that parties can become more diverse.
So they're more generalized.
Not necessarily generalized, but I'm advocating eliminating things like the party whip.
I agree with that. I agree with the party whip. I will.
Yes.
I think the party whip really sort of emulates the current political party that we have today.
I agree.
And I think that we need to move away from that, and that's what I'm talking about when I say decentralizing. I'm talking about having more wiggle room within the party, so we don't have this vast group of people trying to fit into this small set.
I see that.
Especially when you talk about the party whip, I agree with you, because I believe that the very nature of the party whip is frankly disparaging towards democracy. It is put in place to consolidate power and to ensure that the same political group that is in power remains in power. And I can see the reason as to why. If you truly believe that your values and your beliefs are good for your country, then you would have a type of consequentialist approach where the ends justify the means. Yes, the party whip is insidious and disparaging towards democracy, but I'm only doing it to create growth in our society. I believe that would be the mentality behind it. Quite frankly, though, I still think that you shouldn't have to have someone that forces you to vote in a certain manner. It essentially offers you an ultimatum between your career and your integrity.
Yeah.
And so I can see...
I agree with
I
that.
think to a certain extent that if you go outside the Democrat and Republican parties in the States, it's sort of like your career or your ideals. And also, I'd just like to touch on the point you made earlier about that's what it would be in an idealistic society. But is not politics and the reformation of policies should that not be the pursuit of an idealistic society?
I think the pursuit should be of a pragmatic society. I mean, you can be as idealistic as you want, but you need to face the fact that there are fundamental human flaws and human fallibilities which hold us back from the idealistic viewpoint that we want.
Well, I agree with you there, but I'll let one of you speak after that. But,
Thank you.
I agree with you, but I don't think that human flaws diminishes diminishes the fact that we should pursue an idealistic society. I mean, idealistic societies, we can take into account flaws of human nature.
I think, though, that pursuing an idealistic society, it should be one that is attainable. It shouldn't be one that is so far-fetched that there's no possible way that
But that's
the
bringing
goals
things
are going
from
to be
being
met.
idealistic to realistic. If you're making them not so far-fetched, you're bringing it from idealistic pursuit to a realistic pursuit.
I feel that
Which is, I think, what it should be.
I feel like it should be realism with just a step beyond
tad bit of
realism.
idealism?
Yes, with a tiny bit of idealism.
I think that, like the point you made about like attainable idealistic societies, I agree with that. But like I think that having a political system where the parties are more decentralized is perhaps not attainable in the short term, but over the long term, like to say attainable. There's sort of short-term attainable and long-term attainable. So should we not aim for a long-term attainable
What
goal?
time frame would you see this?
So I think decentralizing political parties has to take place over almost a generation. So our children, like the children of the next generation, grow up being more and more involved in politics, so they can make more informed decisions.
But I think almost the decentralization that you're talking about of parties is almost goes against the very I would say pursuit of people, which is power. I mean, everybody wants power. When you decentralize, you're essentially saying, I will give you the ability to I will relinquish my power that I have now. And when someone has that taste of power, I don't think you can ever expect for them to go back to that mundanity.
It's not talking about relinquishing power. I think it's ultimately what the people want. I think, though, I agree with Rajan in the fact that I think that if this transition was made, I don't think that it's unrealistic to hope for a change like this. But I would wonder, what would you envision, and if this was accomplished, what would you envision the political system to look like in a generation?
Well, honestly, like I agree, it needs a lot of work. So I don't think I can just pull out a magical solution that will create an idealistic society and a generation. But
how about a realistic one?
So what do you mean by a realistic?
I mean, like, what if you
like a realistic, by saying a realistic one, you're sort of like it's saying that it's a realistic sort of means what is realistic now. So
I said in the future, and in one generation.
So like you're saying.
Can I go back to a previous point that you mentioned earlier that I disagree with? You had mentioned before that it's not about relinquishing power. But I completely disagree. For example, me and Rajan, we had an exchange about the party whip, and we agreed that the party whip is fairly disparaging towards democracy. But by removing the party whip, you are essentially relinquishing power and advocating that you are all right with losing your power, because the party whip's sole purpose is to consolidate power. Sole purpose is to make sure that when it's crunch time and there are votes that they need your yes tick on, that you vote yes. When they give you the three line underneath your name, that means you come into Parliament and you vote in this manner, or you lose your position.
See, Wes, when you say it's hard to get people to relinquish power, but I'm not talking about taking power away from people now. I'm talking about in the future trying to transition into a democratic society that is not based on power, because frankly, power sort of corrupts people, and
but again, that's far too idealistic. That is ingrained in human sentiment. The lust for power. You cannot.
Let me ask you one thing.
Wait, Sahad, what's Sahad?
Oh, sorry, could you repeat?
Can I answer that?
Could I just ask Wes?
Just talk.
Okay, Wes, could I ask you? So, what makes you think that it's human nature that promotes power and not Western society?
Okay, well, what derives? I don't mean to have a political answer and answer your question with a question. But what derives Western society? What created Western society?
Well,
I would argue human nature.
Well, I think that civilization, like the building of civilizations, created sort of the yearning for power, and I think that civilizations were created by human nature innately. I think it all links back to civilization. Well, let's just look at the amount of places that sort of there was far more societies in the world that were not like highly centered, like they were small groups of people, and not that big of a pursuit of power. It's just that the groups. I'm sorry, I must say one more thing. I'm sorry. The groups themselves may have been smaller, but I still think they're microcosms of the larger scale. You still had someone in charge. There was still someone that people looked to as a leader, and there was still someone who wanted to be true.
I agree. What do you say?
No, all I was going to say is that this whole goal of yours to achieve this idealistic or even realistic society in a generation, this whole pursuit would sooner or later end up in a relinquishing power. And this relinquishing power, I don't think this could happen in just a long period of time. I think that this would happen, that there would be a preparing period, and then there would just be a period where it just happens. And when that period comes, what are you going to do?
Can I just say that I just want to answer Wes's comment, which is now a while back.
Wait, no, let Rajan, because he's answering Sahad, and then you can go back to him.
So Sahad, I think that you can gradually diminish power. I don't think you can.
How would you go?
Okay, let's take the example of the party whip. I think we all agree that the party whip is sort of a representation of great power within a political party. And by eliminating that rule, you eliminate part of the party's power. And if we take gradual steps like that, maybe not even over one generation, but over several generations, we can gradually transform ourselves into a more idealistic society.
Rajan, I have one question though for that. If you were, say, in charge of the nation, okay, and I'm sure you have a bunch of reforms that you think that should be put into place, a bunch of things that you would do differently, okay? If you had the opportunity to stay in power through a party whip because you truly believe that, well, my ideas and my ideals, I think that they can make a very big, substantive difference in this country, would you not want to be able to stay in power, even though maybe because you, a very educated and erudite person, you know what's in the best interest of your country, and they may not know what is in the best interest of their country?
Well, see, I sort of see this point you're making, but as a leader of a country, I think my focus would be on decentralizing power. So if I used the party whip, I'd be becoming a hypocrite. So I can see the point you're making, but if I was the leader of a country, I'd be focused on sort of decentralizing the party power.
I don't think that. I think that what you're suggesting is not possible. Eventually, kind of removing power from a political system, from
Not the political system itself, but from the political party.
from the political parties. The very nature of the party is to govern. Is to govern people, is to be responsible for people, is to take charge of people. That means, by definition, that they are going to be playing a role involved in controlling people, which means power. They have power.
People lots of time they love to preach about a responsibility and individuality and doing things for yourself. But if you truly were so vehement of personal responsibility, you wouldn't form society. The very nature of society means that you're trying to relinquish some of your own responsibilities and work cohesively with others.
I would also argue the fact that while it's there will not be a relinquishing of power. There will not be a lessening of power
do you believe
to the
that
political
eliminating
party.
the political whip should not be eliminated?
I think
it can be eliminated, but it would just...
That contradicts what you just said. You just said that political party powers could not be diminished. And by eliminating the position of the party whip, you are essentially doing just that.
How I look at the party whip, I look at the party whip as a disparagement towards democracy, but I don't think that we should necessarily remove it. Like, I agree that the party whip, it does taint what we have known as democracy, the fact that we're all free thinking and we vote based on what we truly feel. But at the same time, as the analogy I've given to you, if you truly believe as though you have a great vision for your country, you want to consolidate power.
Yeah,
and I don't think you can begrudge someone for wanting to consolidate power.
I don't think you can begrudge someone, but I don't think it's I don't think it's constructive to democracy itself.
I think if we had more political activism, then I could see a place where the party would not exist.
Do you not want to encourage a society that promotes more political activism?
I would love to encourage a society that would promote activism, but how is that attainable?
I think we have to find a way for that to be attainable. I don't have the answers, but
Lane, what do you think?
I agree with you.
I think we should find a way to make this attainable, but I don't think that the solution is, or part of the solution is, getting the political parties to relinquish what power they have. We need people to govern, to have a higher power over us. That's necessary.
The idea is not to
make them relinquish power.
The idea is not to relinquish the power of the government. It's to have political parties that are more sort of decentralized and
essentially they're more governed by the people. It's not just like this political entity itself that is governing the people, but the people that it should be the people that use the political entity as a proxy, essentially, to facilitate their own ideals.
I completely agree.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Do you guys have any final last words?
Nothing.
No. All right. Thank you.
I'm a little tired.